We don't often talk about who the Holy Spirit is and what he does. And we have this misunderstanding on several levels. One of it is, I think we always want to look for some type of manifestation. We're no better off than the Pharisees that used to say, "Show me a sign. Show me a sign. I want to see something. I want to grasp a hold of it." And we have a lot of those things that we've used in kind of a way to hold on to and to say, yeah, that's an evidence of, but that are really wrong. And it scares me that we want to have something physical as proof of someone who is anything but physical in our lives. I think sometimes we begin to think that worship and part of this whole Holy Spirit thing is all to do with the music. Do not understand me. I love our musicians. I love our worship team. What's that? Huh? Do not misunderstand me. You're correct. Yeah, and I'm trying to be very careful that I don't get them concerned, because I really, really appreciate and feel honored that we have such incredible musicians who love the Lord and who every one of them have had an enriching experience of Christ in their lives. But sometimes we tend to call just the music worship, or use the worship to say it brings us the Spirit of God. Sometimes we think worship is all about the message and whether the preacher was good or not, or whether he was on his toes or not, or whether he made mistakes or not. And we've come up with all these things that really are parts of worship and parts of understanding the Spirit in our lives, but they're tools to get us there. I want us to go to a really big word this morning. And I know I shouldn't use words I can't pronounce and I can't understand. But we have to get a grasp of how great our God is before we can go any further. This word omnipresent basically means that God is everywhere. In fact, it even goes just for the fact, beyond the fact that he is everywhere. It goes to the fact that he's not limited to time or place. Now, I know that if we are burning the candles at both ends, we try to be in multiple places at multiple times. And I'm just simply, you know me, I'm preaching to the choir at this point. I am well experienced in trying to do this. In fact, I even thought with my multiple personalities I could be in different places, but that doesn't work either. I'm limited to where my body can be. And even though my mind is sometimes someplace else than what I'm doing, I'm still limited in time and place, and I am not omnipresent, because it also goes another word with it is called omnipotent. Our God has a sense of being everywhere all the time. So before you got here this morning, before we unlocked the door, before we turned the light switch on, God was here waiting and knowing that you were coming. And let me blow that just a little bit further. He was at your house this morning watching. He was in your house this morning, caring for you. He was in your car, coming here this morning. And even when I forgot something, he was with me when I went back. We need to grasp this a little bit further, and I want to take you to a very incredible psalm this morning. It's 139. And I'm probably going to read more of it than really talk about it, because I want you to connect and to catch how the psalmist describes this omnipresence of God. You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It's too lofty for me to attain. Wow. He talks about God knowing us, seeing us, and inside our mind as well. Then he says, and where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? Not that we've ever tried to run from God. The psalmist is saying, you're so great, I can't hide anywhere from you. I am with you. If I go up to the heavens, you're there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me, your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me, and the light become night around me, even the darkness will not be too dark for you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. Do you catch this glimpse of the presence and the promise of the presence of God in everything you do? Now, there's two ways to look at this. You could be like the little boy in the middle of the sermon who had crawled down into the pew. And his mom said, what are you doing down there? He says, if God knows everything about me, I'm trying to hide. There is no hiding. So we come across this thing, and it's kind of, in one sense, it's kind of a scary thing, isn't it? To know that God knows my thoughts. I used to think my mother knew my thoughts. You know, I just thought like she had this radar within her. She could tell what I was thinking at times because she would look at me and she said, I know what you're thinking. And so it was enough to drill it into me. And so there's kind of real negative things. You know, one of our foster daughters would look at us and say, well, you're going to find this out anyhow, so I might as well tell you. That was not a comforting statement. So there is a fiery side. There is a scary side that we have thoughts in our minds. I don't know about you, but I have thoughts in my mind that I'd like to just kind of pull the shade over and not let God see them. But there's another side about God's presence that we need to understand. And that's the comforting side. That's the side that you and I want when we come to worship. We want to somehow, within the depths of us, know that God is with me. We want to be like Moses whenever God said, I'm not going to go with you. You guys are going to have to go on this trip yourself. And God said, we're not leaving this place without you. You got me into this, and you're getting me out of it. We want to know the President's presence. We want to know that there's a confidence and a filling of this Holy Spirit that empowers our lives to follow God and to do the right thing. And that when He tells us to get out of the boat and walk, we're willing to get out of the boat and walk. Or when we're crying and we're hurting and we don't know what in the world's happening next, that He is there to comfort us. We want that. And it doesn't come by doing a magical formula and having a call to worship and singing 4 songs it doesn't happen that way. It's kind of like this. We kind of always had this rule at our house that if you came to help me work on a project, the refrigerator was open in the garage, just help yourself. Don't come and ask. What was the phrase we would say? Make yourself at home. Right? When somebody comes to the door, we say, come on in. Make yourself at home. But do we really mean that? What happens if they start to go through our cupboards? What happens if they decide to eat that last piece of pizza you were saving for breakfast tomorrow morning? You broke Grandma's special dish. We don't eat out of that. We have forbidden towels at our house. Don't use those. They're in the guest bathroom. There's consequences, I know. And we kind of act that way with the Holy Spirit. Hey, come on in, Father. Send your Spirit upon me. I want that comfort stuff. Make yourself at home. Oh, no, 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 no. You can't touch that room. And you can't touch that part of my heart. Because it's mine. Then he goes on, he talks about this whole thing of creation. Of you. And he says in here that I formed you in your mother's womb. I made you a living being in your mother's womb, and I crafted you into the person I wanted you to be. I was made in the secret place when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body, and all the days ordained for me were written in your book that came to be. Do I need to remind you that God's life in mothers begin at conception? I've never figured out why, if you're in an accident, you kill a pregnant woman, you're guilty of 2 manslaughters. But we could go in and kill that baby. God created you in your mother's womb. How precious to me are your thoughts, God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of the sand. And when I awake, I am still with you. This psalm ends in a very interesting way, and I want to talk to you about 3 dangerous prayers, and I've called them the trifecta prayers. This thing ends with 3 prayers. The first one says, search me, God, and know my heart. Test me. Search me, O God, and know my heart. My nephew, who preached here a year ago, the college professor, has written a new book called The Self-Revealed Leader. Fascinating book. He goes back and picks up an article or a psychological tool that I've known for years, known as the Johari window. The Johari window simply is a window pane with 4 panes in it, because it says each of us has 4 quadrants to our lives. And this one quadrant up here is everything that I see about myself and everything that I let other people see. Then there's a window that says this is, but the last one is that bottom corner down there are things that nobody ever knows about me and things that I won't let myself know about me. It's a hidden area of our hearts. Everybody has them 4 quadrants. Everybody has that area where we don't even want God to get to us. Let me tell you how I know that. Have you ever said something to somebody about an area in your life that you thought they needed to address? And what was the response? Not me. So that's that area that they're aware of, but we're not aware of. But how does God get into that area that nobody else sees and I won't go there myself? About 21 years ago, I prayed this prayer after listening to a preacher talk about 3 dangerous prayers. Search me, O God. Know my heart. My nephew in his book talks about how he was fired from a job and how he was angry at the leadership for the people who fired him. And then he began to realize that in the middle of that, somebody sat down with him and talked about some hidden areas of his life. And when he changed those, God took him someplace greater. When I prayed this thing and God worked in my life and exposed some things that needed to happen before I could become a church planter, it took an awful lot of pain and suffering because I didn't want to admit they were there, and I wanted to kind of push them away from them. And I said, hey, let's talk about food. I like food. Let's not talk about this stuff. Search me, God, know my heart. Experience my heart. This third part of this trifecta is test me. Test me. Now, the idea of a test, and I know a lot of you are like me. When you had tests in school, you didn't do well. But God's tests are when he tends to put the pressure on us and we see how we respond. It exposes what is there. And one of the things that he wants to expose in our lives is our anxious thoughts. Do you know we all have anxiety? We have different levels of it, don't we? How many of you like it when anxiety shows up? We don't like it. But there's a level of it that we like to hang on to because we like to nurse it. And we think it feels okay. We like a little tension in our lives. But it says, know my anxious thoughts. In other words, what am I worried about? What is it that I have trying to take control of by worrying it to death? And I know some of you are so good at worrying, when you don't have anything to worry about, you're worried. Philippians writes and says the key to contentment is in everything that we're concerned about to give thanks to God. Because when he searches our hearts and we're dealing with anxiety, it's a matter of us giving back to him what he really wants to carry. Bring your cares and your burdens to me. Cast them on me. I will give you rest. Test me. Show me those anxious thoughts. What am I so worried about? And the third one is see. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. See if there's any offensive way in me. These are those porcupine people, aren't they? And it's easy for us to really think of some people who are obnoxious and offensive, right? We probably don't have to think real hard to come up with somebody in our life that's, man, are they ever offensive? But help us to see there's a struggle in that because we don't want to look at ourselves. And we don't realize that God is bringing in some of this testing into our lives to expose to us that we have offensive ways that offend him and that bother him. And sometimes the only way we begin to see those is through a crisis. And then we find out what really comes out of our hearts. Oh, there's so many times I look for something on my computer and I finally realize I never put that in there. But I think it should come out anyhow. There was an old puppet show years ago, and one of the songs was input, output. What goes in comes out. Search me, God. Lead me to an everlasting way. You know, there's this passage from Thessalonians that once again talks about us rejoicing and praying continually, giving thanks in all the circumstances that we're in because it's God's will for us. But notice this last line. Do not quench the Spirit. It's fascinating what that word means. Quench. We don't use it every day, do we? In fact, I was surprised it was still in some of the modern translations. Basically means a fire extinguisher. If we were to pull the pin on that fire extinguisher over there, and there was a fire in the area, it would put it out. It would smother it. You know, I think too many times in our lives, we hear the nudging of the Spirit and we quench it. We pull our fire extinguisher up. I got to digress a minute. One of my jobs when I was in college was driving school bus. And I had this junior high route that just did everything imaginable. So one night I was tired of the cigarette smoking on the bus. And I made this announcement that if I smelled any smoke, I was coming back the aisle with a fire extinguisher. I no sooner looked up in my mirror till I couldn't see the back of the bus. You know that thing that says emergency room? I'm serious. I pulled that bus over, I turned it off, I grabbed the key, I grabbed the fire extinguisher, and I was going to extinguish cigarettes. We didn't have video cameras. I do not know where those cigarettes went. But we never had a smoke on the bus for a long time. Because they knew that I would quench their smoke and do a lot more damage as well. And yet we pull fire extinguishers out on that still small voice of God when His omnipresence is around us. And He's saying, listen to me. Listen to me. And it comes from that inner nudging that I am here. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in a special place, with a special ritual, with something that we're doing to make it happen. The biggest thing we can do is to have a surrendered heart that acts in faith that He is with me wherever I go. And He might want to just whisper into my heart that He wants me to make a turn ahead, or He wants me to love somebody, or that He doesn't want me to go back to sleep on a Sunday morning, or that He wants me to give, or that He wants me to stop and help somebody along the way, or that He wants me. I can tell you times in my life where I've listened to that still small voice, and the blessing was really, really incredible. And I can tell you sometimes when I didn't listen, and I wondered where God was. I want to challenge you this morning to something. I want to challenge you to these trifecta prayers. Make them your prayer for a week. Search my heart, O God. Know me today. Test me. See if there's anything in me. And then begin to see what God does in your life. See if you don't sense His presence helping you grow, helping you live, and do it in a more way. Kathy's going to sing a song.